All right, we are here with Tim Leffel. The book is A Better Life for Half the Price. Second edition just came out recently. Little visual of what the Audible looks like. Tim, thanks for joining us today. Just want to let us know where you're talking to us from and what's been going on with your travels lately.
Yeah, sure. Normally I live inland in Mexico, kind of smack in the middle of the country up in the highlands in a city called Guanajuato. But I'm on a beach break right now because we're landlocked there. And every once in a while, you start getting an urge for the ocean. So I'm on the Nayarit coast, Pacific coast of Mexico. So San Pancho, Sayulita, that area north of Puerto Vallarta.
So, you know, I love the book. I've read a handful of different expat books, a lot of them kind of just about theory, but I like how you go into the details of the visa, the cost of living, food, entertainment of each of the different, destinations you talk about. Right now I'm up to Vietnam. And I was blown away with how many different locations you profiled, but what inspired you to write the book in the first place and then do the second edition recently?
Yeah, so the first one I put out just because, I wasn't satisfied with a lot of what was out there already, in terms of international living and living invested overseas and those kind of publications. I think they serve a purpose and their information's generally pretty reliable in terms of prices and things like that. But they're just constantly pitching you on, seminars and their real estate buddies and all of that. And I wanted to just give a more balanced picture because no place is paradise, as we all know, including where you are right now if you haven't moved. So, it's good to just know what you're up against in each of these places. And I did want to give the nitty gritty details from people that were living there and whatever kind of struggles they had gone through. And also just spend some time on the mindset part of it, because I think, especially if you're just only seeing the positive stories out there, you maybe haven't sat back and thought, well, is this life really for me or not? Am I cut out for this? Is one of the chapters in there, because I think it's important to go through that thought process before you start, changing your life and laying out money and buying plane tickets and all that. But anyway, there's 19 countries, and I mostly picked those based on where you could live for half of what it cost you in Western Europe or the USA or Canada. And also places that have a reasonable infrastructure and a reasonable chance of you living there long term. Having said that, I've got a few countries in there like Indonesia that make it really tough. And but somehow people just keep moving to Bali in normal times, and they just get on a plane every month and renew their visa, which to me sounds nuts. But anyway, it's in there. And then others make it super easy, like Georgia. You can go for a year on a tourist visa. Mexico, you can go for 6 months. So a lot of places make it much easier for you to be a digital nomad or just someone who's bopping around to different places for a while.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I don't know, not talked about enough of what moving to a lower cost of living really can do, especially if you do it, earlier in your life and you got a job or a business where you can work remotely. I mean, just that low cost of living over so many years and decades, and it could really change someone's life.
Makes a huge difference. And, there's a sort of related movement, this financial independence, retire early movement. Yeah. And I interviewed a couple of people in the book that were part of that crowd. And they came to that realization like, oh, I can work, 10 more years in this job I don't really like that much to keep on my spreadsheet plan, or I could just move to Panama and do it now, and that's an easy decision, I think, for a lot of people. And, retire early sounds nice, but, if you spent 40 years in a job you didn't really like to get there, then I don't think that's so great, I would rather enjoy my life all the time, not just in my later years.
I agree. It's sort of a tip of the hat to the previous generations who did, where the thought was you just stick at a place for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. And then you retire when you're hobbling around with a cane.
Right, right. So, I mean, I guess we had to go through that to get to this, but thankful of that. Now, what was the most surprising changes or updates from the first edition to the second?
Well, I was kind of surprised that prices haven't really gone up, and that's partly a currency exchange issue. Wherever you come from, your own country's currency is going to have an impact on how expensive or not expensive a place is. Right now, it's kind of sucky for Canadians. They've been um, experiencing a declining currency for a while, but if you're American from the USA, it's been a pretty good run for about the last 10 years. So really, there were only 2 or 3 places in the book from the first edition to the second where prices actually went up. One of those was Thailand. One of them was Portugal, and those are for 2 different reasons. Thailand is just because of currency differences. Their currency was pretty strong. Portugal is because it's gotten a lot more popular. A lot of Brits have moved there and bought property, and naturally that drives up the prices in the most popular places. It's mostly Lisbon and the Algarve in that particular country, but still, if you're moving to the capital, you're going to definitely see prices higher than they were 5 or 6 years ago. But the same is true of London or San Francisco, a lot of other places too. I mean, prices just over time are going to go up. But yeah, they didn't change much from 2014 when the first edition came out. And some places are actually a little cheaper. Mexico's cheaper, Colombia is cheaper. So sometimes it's kind of counterintuitive, but you can actually be better off than you were a decade ago.
Was there any countries that you took off in the second edition that weren't really a good destination anymore?
No, I don't think so. I added Georgia. I still haven't been there. I had plans to go last year, and then like a lot of plans, those got tossed out. I think I added a couple, but I didn't take out anything because no place has really gotten out of reach that I had featured. And I made a few changes here and there in the honorable mentions. I mean, that's where I kind of throw in some places that either aren't very popular yet, or they're kind of borderline on the prices. It depends on where you go. And that's true for a lot of countries, by the way. I mean, if you're considering somewhere like Greece or Croatia, they're not a bad deal. They're just not as cheap as these others. And if you go to an area in those countries that's maybe not so popular, like, let's pick Greece. If you go to the second largest city there instead of Mykonos or Santorini, then you might be able to get a pretty good deal. But it's just in the popular spots, it's more expensive.
Yeah, Andrew Henderson has talked up Georgia for quite a while. That'd be a very interesting place to go.
A lot of digital nomads ended up there during this pandemic because they were still letting people in for quite a while, kind of like Mexico. A lot of them moved to Mexico too, because they couldn't stay in Thailand or Western Europe or wherever they were. So they ended up in one of these countries that was more welcoming, and it's a great deal there. I mean, I haven't seen it firsthand yet, but I've got a few friends that live there, and I don't think Tbilisi is like one of the world's great cities, in terms of architecture. But if you could pay $400 or $500 a month for a nice apartment, then that's going to give you a pretty good life.
Yeah. Just based on the analytics, it looks like most of my viewers are male, 25 to 35 years old, probably single. Everyone's got different personalities, but what, of the places in the book, what may be some destinations they would be interested in looking into further?
Yeah, just based on demographics, assuming they're not attached yet, there are places that are kind of well known for young single men, like Thailand, for instance. There's a reason Chiang Mai is so popular, and a lot are in Bangkok too. And then also the countries in Europe, you've got a cultural similarity there. It's not so difficult if you move to, Hungary or Bulgaria or Romania or somewhere like that. First of all, people are, in all those countries I just mentioned, people are more likely to speak English because their own language is so useless outside of their country. You can't do much with Hungarian or Czech or Romanian or Thai once you leave your own borders. So people there, young people especially, tend to learn English in school and on, informally as well. So that helps. I mean, if you move to a Latin American country, as you know, it's pretty hard to get by without any Spanish unless you're in a total gringo enclave. Whereas in most of these other countries I mentioned, you can get by in English pretty easily just because it's the language of tourism, it's the language of business, and kids study it in school. And so that can help. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I mean, just depends on what you're into. A lot of young people move to Medellin too in Colombia, and that's kind of become a hot spot for digital nomads.
Yeah.
Good nightlife, lots of gorgeous women. It's definitely got a lot going for it, and it's a very vivacious culture and lots of dancing and drinking and fun.
Gotcha. What, maybe you have this answer or not, but what are some of, like, right now, what's going to be the next Thailand in 10 to 20 years, some up and coming destinations?
Yeah, I don't know. I've talked about that with a couple of people, and it could be Georgia. It could even be Albania. You can actually stay for a year in Albania on a tourist visa. And in the capital of Tirana, you can get like a baller apartment for $700 a month. It's like a penthouse with balconies and, a really nice place. And then you're only like an hour and a half from the beach.
And I think they have no COVID entry requirements also at this time.
Yeah,
I think they're one of the completely open countries.
Yeah, they're open, and it hasn't been much of an issue there, thankfully. It's kind of like a luck of the draw in some of these places, but others, they just did a better job of like masking up and, keeping their distance and whatever. I mean, Cambodia and Vietnam have had almost no cases. I mean, they've had normal life there for about 9 months.
Yeah.
It's they're just not letting anybody in though, because they want to keep it that way. So it's not so great if you're a traveler, but it's great if you live there. And I think Albania was like that too. They just locked down, and I don't know, maybe it's easier if you're a communist country or a former communist one. You're used to like following the rules.
Yeah. Used to be in control.
The spirit of independence in the USA is a double-edged sword.
It is. Yeah, I know you mentioned you like to talk about the kind of the grittier sides of travel, as I do as well. Just kind of, know what you're coming to expect, but also know what you don't know about, what you might like about a place or what you may not like. So what are some of the most overlooked, aspects of living as an expat? Maybe the things that our ego or our biases or our personalities tend to overlook, and maybe we get burned in the end, but it could be totally avoidable if we just knew ourselves better.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first of all, I always advise people to do a trial run before they pick up and move somewhere, because if you go somewhere as a tourist, you don't really see the whole side, the whole picture.
Very true.
Whereas if you live in a neighborhood and you shop locally and get things done, then you can really see what it's like. But anyway, I mean, I think in developing countries in general, you just have to make some sacrifices and understand that things are not going to move as quickly. There's not going to be the same time urgency. There's probably going to be more litter and graffiti and, things like that. I mean, we have a very sanitized existence in Western Europe and Canada and the USA and Australia. Things are relatively clean. The infrastructure works, the Wi-Fi is good, all these things you kind of depend on. They might not be dependable where you're going, and there's going to be a lot of little irksome things that get on your nerves, but you've just got to, be adaptable and go with the flow. And I think what trips up people a lot is that sense of time. And, if you're getting work done on your house and the guy says he's going to come at 10, and he comes at noon, you should probably consider yourself lucky. That's pretty good. I mean, the fact he made it there is pretty good. And that really drives some people crazy, if they have a real type A personality or they're just used to being punctual all the time. But it gets done eventually, and there's also just a prioritization difference, which I really like. Family comes first, and fun comes first. There's not a lot of workaholics in Latin America, and
right.
They get the job done, and they do a good job when they're working, but they're not going to dedicate their life to it, and they're not going to work 7 days a week just because you want them to.
Yeah. 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 That's one of the things I loved, one of the things I first noticed going to Puerto Rico is just family's important. And, they're always looking for an excuse to, have a good time and maybe throw back some beers or something like that.
Yeah.
But
and each country has its quirks. I interviewed this guy from Montenegro, and he said, man, people here are great at coming up with ideas and saying they can do something, and they're willing to go for it, but they really have no idea of how to execute on it. And so they never get it done. I just thought that was an interesting perspective.
I had a shock recently. This week, I went to the bank 4 times in 3 days just to withdraw money from an account that I have there. And
really?
One time it was my fault just because I didn't really know, but the other 2 times they changed like a rule on me from one day to the next. And that was probably I wanted to be that American and just kind of have a little spaz moment, but I know, hey man, it's just, that's just how it is.
It's not going to accomplish anything to scream and yell about it. You just have to come back. And yeah, it's funny on that money thing. Argentina is in the book, and it's a popular country for a lot of reasons and a lot of great things about it. But it's a constant hassle to get to your money there. And so, things like that, you just got to realize that that's going to be a part of your weekly routine. Is 3 times a week, you're going to have to hit the ATM, or you're going to have to find an alternate method like Zoom with an X, or, PayPal or whatever. If you can even use it there. I don't know if you can even use PayPal, but people use their debit card and credit card for virtually everything that they can in Argentina, because you can only take out about $150 at a time. So It really makes life difficult.
Yeah, that's quite the limit. What personality types, or who is the expat life not for?
Yeah, well, we already mentioned people that are very time crunch sensitive and maybe easily stressed. That's probably not a good match. Also, people that are very dogmatic in their views and aren't very flexible or adaptable tend to have a really tough time. And especially the rah-rah nationalists who think everything is great in their own country, they tend to have a tough time accepting other cultures and other traditions. I mean, sometimes those traditions have been in place for hundreds of years, so you're not going to change them just because you think they're wrong. And so you kind of just have to understand that that's the way things work. And just that flexibility and adaptability thing is really important. I mean, it's true for travelers too, not just, moving abroad, but if you're going to go backpacking around the world, you better be good at adapting to different challenges and different situations, and buses not showing up when they're supposed to, or going to where they're supposed to. And, it's true when you're living somewhere too. And the last one is people that are super grounded in their community often have a tough time leaving and going somewhere else. I mean, they would probably have a tough time just going from, Chicago to Seattle, but, it gets amplified when you go abroad and you're dealing with different language and different culture and all that. But, if your most important thing in your life is, your local running club or your local church or, your civic organizations, then maybe just do this part of the year and not the whole year. There's plenty of people that go abroad for 6 months and then they come back home for 6 months, and they do that year after year. And maybe that's a better move, because then you're not away from it so long. And if you're older, maybe you're not away from your grandkids the whole year. That can make a difference too for some people.
Gotcha. Now, where have you been in all your travels? Just a quick overview, and what's coming up next for you?
So when I was younger, I backpacked around the world 3 times.
Wow.
With my girlfriend. She actually was the one that made it happen, and now she's my wife. But we traveled for a year and we didn't kill each other, so then we decided we could get married. But on that first trip, we went to a lot of places everybody does. Well, first we went to Japan because we had a relative there. And then we went all through Southeast Asia, India, Nepal, and then we actually taught English in Turkey for a while. We got certified to teach English in Bangkok, actually, through the TEFL course through Cambridge. And little time in Europe, Greece, England, Holland, and then we came home and we saved some more money. We took off again. Next time we went to Morocco, the Middle East, taught English in Korea for a year, and then we traveled again for another year. And that's something I would strongly advise younger people is look at teaching English in Asia or the Middle East or somewhere like that, because you can make pretty good money and they'll take care of your accommodation. And so we socked away enough that we traveled for a whole year and still had half of it left when we came home. So that was a nice one. But then I had a kid eventually, and after that, I started traveling a lot more in Latin America. We sort of left that for later, figuring, it's close enough that we can get there later. So I've spent a lot more time in Latin America and Western Europe in the past 10 years or so. And but yeah, so as far as living abroad, I lived in Turkey and South Korea and in Mexico. I used to have a little beach house in the Yucatan Peninsula near Merida, but I never lived there. It was just a getaway place. So we have a permanent home in Guanajuato, Mexico. I rented for a year there first, which I strongly advise, but then we eventually ended up buying a house there. We found a really good deal. And so the good thing about that is you have to pay cash in most of these developing countries when you buy real estate. So it kind of forces you to only buy a place that you can afford. And so, the way people usually do it, they sell something in their home country and buy something overseas, and that's what we did. And so we own it free and clear, which was a beautiful thing during this pandemic because my income plummeted for a while, and it was no big deal because all we had was like utilities and food, and nobody was going out or doing anything, so we weren't spending much.
Nice. What from I don't know how long ago you did travel the world, but from people you've talked to, is there a ballpark range of, hey, this is a good amount to have if you aren't going to work but want to see the world, as far as costs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because people travel in different ways, and then the destinations can make a huge difference. I mean, if you go backpacking around France, Italy, England, those places, you're going to spend a fortune. But if you go backpacking around India and Nepal, you're going to spend next to nothing. So, it's hard to estimate. I mean, Nomadic Matt, the blogger, has a book out called Travel the World on $50 a day. And I think that's probably a pretty fair amount, if you just want to say the whole world, because some places are going to cost more and some less. But I would say a couple can travel on that pretty easily in a lot of countries, depending on where you are, if you're being really frugal and you're not moving around a lot. But that's another thing, like the more you are on the move, the more you're going to spend, because you're going to spend a lot of money on transportation. Whereas if you just go kick back at a beach for 2 weeks, you're just eating rice and vegetables and seafood, and that's about it. And hanging around in the hammock. So, I mean, I think when we traveled the first time, we were on a budget of like $750 a month for the two of us. And that would be pretty tight to do now, but you still could do it in some places. But I think if you had $1,000 a month for a couple, or $1,500 a month, you could travel a big chunk of the world with that. I mean, not Switzerland or Japan or Norway, but a whole lot of places. But I mean, some places just the accommodation costs are so much higher. That's what really drives up your daily budget. I mean, Western Europe especially, you could be paying $40 a person for a hostel. So that kind of blows your budget in a hurry.
Well, Tim, any closing thoughts, comments? Let us, let people know how they can get a hold of your work. Again, the book is A Better Life for Half the Price. The audiobook is fantastic, but I tell you, there's some times where I wish I had the book so I could highlight or underline some things. Yeah,
there's advantages to different formats. It is out in paperback on Amazon, and that audiobook's on Amazon via Audible. And then I sell the ebook directly. That's so I could throw a bunch of other goodies in there and also keep in touch with people because I have their email address. So that is cheaplivingabroad.com. That's the book website. My blog has been up since 2003, so I'm kind of one of the early pioneers. As you could tell, I'm not a super young man, but that's cheapestdestinationsblog.com. There's loads and loads of free info on there if you just want to get an idea. There's some articles about the cheapest places to travel, ones that are open right now, and then some of the cheapest places to live. And then, I just write about bargain travel tips and how to get more for less and travel hacking and all that good stuff. So that's probably the best place to go. And then if you want to find anything else out about me, books, articles, whatever, it's timleffel.com, just my name.
Okay. I'll put the links to those in the description. Tim, thanks so much. It was a good chat, and I hope people got a lot of value from it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, and hopefully people will check it out and spread the word.
Absolutely. Be safe.
You too.